Let's talk about a really key but simple idea for creating the environment in your painting. I think this will be really eye-opening and create a clear path to achieving harmony and atmosphere almost immediately in your work. I received this painting for critique from Seth. Seth, thank you for sharing this nice piece. I got your message here. I really wanted to improve the colors on my work, the shapes, and also values. The one I referenced on this work has a natural low contrast, but still able to show the light and shadows without using strong values. Almost muted light, while using colors that look dull but not muddy and are still able to show some saturation. This is great. So let's start with a brief overview of your painting. We have the palette here, and then for Jazz's painting, we have this one. And if we just compare some of the differences, we can see that this palette has a lot more variety in color, more contrast in color, and also contrast in value. You get into brighter values more quickly than Jazz does, and his colors are much more connected to the color of the environment. But there's a little bit more going on here. I want to show you a histogram. These are the values in Jazz's painting, and these are the values in your painting. And notice how much more limited Jazz's palette is. 90% of these values fall within this narrow range, but your painting is spread out in a much wider range. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with this, but Jazz's limited palette is achieving a greater sense of atmosphere. Everything feels connected. We still have some bright areas and vivid colors, but the vast majority of these are so close to each other. So if you want to build atmosphere into your paintings right at the beginning, here's a way you could do it using Jazz's painting as an example. You can start with an approximate color of the environment. I feel like this is a nice color for Jazz's painting. If I paint over this, you can see that a lot of the colors and values connect with this very well. And this color is basically an ambient shadow. It's an approximation of what colors look like in the absence of a direct light source. So the next step would be to mix colors of light, but we want to keep a tight range. And there's two factors that we want to watch out for: how the color is changing and how the value is changing. This is the color of the wall. This is the color for these green plants. This is the robe he's wearing. This is the beginning of his flesh tones. And this is coming from the top of this here. We know that the light shades will be brighter, and we might see more of the color of the object itself, which is called the local color. And we only want to make the slightest shift for both of these factors. And of course, I get to cheat by color picking, but let me demo this red. I'm going to do this from scratch. So you can start with your environment color, go to your color picker, and it might be easiest to start by changing the hue, and the value will basically stay the same. So I'm going to just move this towards red. It really could be anywhere within here. I'll let it fall inside of there. And let's start with that for now and just compare these colors to each other. So this is darker. We want to make sure that this is brighter. So I'll come back to this, and then I can go up in value, compare again, and now the hue is different, but the value is the same. But I still feel very far away from red. The problem is, if I get into red and I go brighter into a value, then we're going to have a very fast jump because red is the opposite of green. So I'm giving you this overarching guide, but we might need to adapt to different situations like this one. And in this case, I'm going to have a red color that will be the same value as the green. I need to be a little bit brighter. And now, even though the colors are different, the values are the same. And so this connects really well. This is ever so slightly brighter than this, I would say. And that feels like it has a nice connection. So if you're in a situation where the color is very far away from your environment color, keep the values extremely close to each other, and then adjust the hue as needed. Just seeing how I did. Pretty good. Now, what I just did is expand the range. Initially, we just had one color for the entire painting. Now we have basically two values, 2 degrees of brightness. But let's just assume that all of these are the same value, but then they're all a bunch of different colors that are all still quite close to the color of the environment, with the exception of this red, perhaps. And you could start making the painting with just these colors. This is your shadow. These are your lights. And the idea would be that you incrementally expand your range only when you have to. Maybe after you put down your base light shades, you can add a darker value for the shadows. Also, notice how I haven't added new colors to my shadows, because if I did that, that would be yet another expansion of the range. So you can expand the range in value and you can expand the range in color variety. And we're trying to be as tight range as possible. And if you have a pressure sensitive brush, then you can even find shades that go in between the shades that are on your palette. Once that's done, you can add a brighter light shade to each object and slowly build up the painting. But remember that the only way this will work is if you structure everything around what is light and what is shadow. Contrast doesn't create structure, consistency does. Jumping in here, I've been editing the video and realized I need to say this. Seth, the way that you're creating your painting, starting with the line drawing, moving into color, and then doing light and shadow afterwards, you are following a very similar approach, starting with a muted range and then expanding the contrast. There's nothing wrong with the way that you went about your painting. It's easier to think more about what objects you're creating. But if you want to create this atmospheric, low contrast, but immersive environment, you need to build the atmosphere through the light and shadow, not the local colors. You're over prioritizing the local colors, and then by shading afterwards, you're not in full control of your palette. But if you centralize all of the shadows back to a single color and a single shade, and of course there's some wiggle room there, but bringing it back to this ambient shadow, everything shooting off from there, that's the secret sauce to creating the environment. It's important to label this as a shadow and these as lights. Don't use this darker value in your lights and don't use these brighter values inside of your shadows. Of course, as you build up the painting, you'll have more wiggle room to not be as rigid, but this could be a great way to practice building your environments, keeping the majority of your painting within a tight range, and you can save your very brightest values for only 1% of your painting, or maybe choose one color that strongly deviates away from that ambient shadow. And it's also nice that you don't need to be super detailed to practice this. You can just quickly mock these up and keep moving forward. So if you do try this, then feel free to send it over for a critique. It's been really fun to do these and give back to the art community. Have a beautiful day.